What's going on, folks? Nate here at Two Wheel Dyno Works, and I am back in the dyno room today with our 25 MT-07, and this time we're doing some intake testing. Now, in the last video that we did on this bike, I sort of alluded to the fact that we would be doing more exhaust testing first. And I haven't done that yet, because my curiosity kind of got the better of me when it came to the intakes on these bikes, because that's where a huge restriction on all the Yamaha CP2s lies. So instead of diving into the various exhaust systems that we have stacked up out there in the shop, I've already got some China knockoff pipe and a Yosh and an Acra and a bunch of other stuff for it, I wanted to see if any of the old aftermarket intake kits, fit on the new throttle bodies. And as you can see here, they do. This is a Hordpower intake. We have loved these intakes for nearly a decade now, since JD Hord started making them, and with very little modification, we were able to get one on our new 25 MT-07. You can see here that this is obviously not the nice black bracket that JD ships these kits with, and that is the only significant difference when it comes to fitment. We had to make our own bracket. We'll actually be sending that to him so he can go ahead and make a much prettier looking one to retrofit these onto the new 25 models, but other than that, it all bolted right up. And we've been such a huge fan of these kits for so many years because they just fucking work. You're not losing power anywhere with these intakes. A lot of other aftermarket intake kits for these bikes shift the power much further in the RPM range. So yes, you do end up with a little bit more peak power, but you're losing more on the bottom and sort of mid-range portion of the revs. And that's not very fun on a twin-cylinder engine that you're spending a lot of time in the mid-range on. And the proof really is in the pudding. That is the before and after. It's a little weird that they're both run 31. I didn't notice that till just now, but whatever. The before and after of our bike with the full M4 exhaust and tuning on it versus the full M4 with the Hordpower intake and, of course, our custom tuning to match. You can see that the improvements are massive literally everywhere. You are gaining 4 foot-pounds of torque throughout pretty much the entire rev range, all the way from like 3,500 out to like 8,000. And you are picking up a massive 7 horsepower right there at 8,500 RPMs, which is really peak power on these bikes. The thing now makes almost 77 horsepower to the tire and 51 pound-feet of torque on pump gas. So that is 7 horsepower at the new peak output out at 8,500 RPMs and 4 foot-pounds of torque throughout the vast majority of the rev range. Every single intake kit that we tested on the old cable throttle bodies simply did not do that. They did not work as well at the peak, or they pulled too much from the bottom and mid-range to make the peak better, and they've never really been happy with us for making those claims, but the reality of the situation is we are not compensated or affiliated by any of these intake or exhaust manufacturers that we test here on our own bikes at Two Wheel Dyno Works, so the data from us is, well, always going to be completely unbiased and no bullshit. Now, for those of you that are curious why this airbox sucks so bad, let's just take a quick look at it. I've already removed the bolt so I can pull the air filter out of there along with the rest of the hardware that you have to pull off to get rid of the lid, which again, has no snorkel on it. So that is no longer a modification you can do on these bikes. But let's take a look inside. You can see one of the runners goes pretty much off into the corner to nowhere. There's very little air that this thing can possibly pull from that corner of the airbox. On the other side, it's a little bit shorter. If I can get my camera to pick this up in there. It's a little bit shorter, and it's got a little bit straighter of a shot. So it can actually pick up some air out of the airbox. But this whole right side runner is just shoved into a corner. And it doesn't take any sort of high-level genius to go, well, that's probably not going to work out well. And obviously, it doesn't. The Hordpower intakes use a very nice, long, equal-length runner for both cylinders, which means to properly tune for them, you actually have to go in and adjust the fueling for each specific cylinder, because now you've dramatically unbalanced it from how it was set up for the stock airbox, which we've done. But the performance improvements are obvious. I mean, you literally pick up power everywhere, and you lose nowhere. Now, it's also worth noting that that curve I just showed you is not exactly the same as we saw on the prior generation bike with the old cable throttle bodies. It didn't really gain anywhere until like 6,000-7,000 RPMs, but then it carried much better on the old throttle bodies. Well, obviously, we're seeing just gains everywhere on this one. So I'm obviously going to then go ahead and retest all the other intake kits on the market for this bike and build custom tuning for them, because I'm curious now if the results have changed on those. Maybe they don't lose more off the bottom. Maybe they gain even more on the top. I don't know, because clearly these throttle bodies act differently than the old ones did, so we'll just have to go through and retest, which we'll be doing, and building custom fuel mapping for just about every exhaust combination we get our hands on. Which is great for you guys, but it means I have a lot of work to do on this platform. And I'm sure some folks will be curious, so I'll go ahead and just show this graph real quick as well before I close out this video. The blue line there, run 14, is this bike bone stock. Stock intake, stock exhaust, stock tuning on our dyno. This is what it made, 67 and about a quarter horse, and 45 and 0.44, what do you even call that, 4/10 of a foot-pound of torque. The thing to look at is at 8,500 RPMs. It has now picked up 11 horsepower and almost 7 pound-feet of torque to the tire on pump gas from just bolt-ons and tuning. And those type of huge performance improvements are why this bike has been so popular for folks to purchase and then modify in the aftermarket, and then obviously have us tune. We have flashed thousands of the old Yamaha CP2 bikes, whether it's the Tenere 700, the R7, the MT-07, the old FZ07, the XSR 700, because they all use the same engine and the recipe is all the same. Intake, exhaust, tuning, and all of a sudden you have a much better bike than you first rolled off the showroom floor with. And because of how screwed up the new throttle-by-wire mapping is in the 2025 model ECUs, the gains at the seat of your pants when you're actually just riding the bike around feel even more dramatic than ever before once you get the stock exhaust and stock intake out of the way and get the bike properly tuned and dialed in from someone like us. So now that my curiosity has been satisfied that the old intake kits can fit on the new throttle bodies, obviously I'm going to go purchase some other ones. We'll get those coming. We'll start doing the exhaust versus exhaust versus exhaust versus exhaust testing and tuning that we did on the prior generation CP2s. And we'll also be building the mapping for all of the other intakes on the market as well. And obviously I will share all that here with you folks on our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram as we go through that testing and tuning. And because we are going through that level of ridiculously tedious and nitty-gritty intake and exhaust specific fuel mapping, I can guarantee that in conjunction with that and our custom ignition timing and throttle-by-wire mapping we built for this bike, that you simply won't find a higher quality ECU flashing product or service for these bikes anywhere else than right here at Two Wheel Dyno Works. Now, if you're looking to get us to flash your ECU, just head over to twowheeldynoworks.com. You can find it in the fitment finder for your year, make, model, and you'll see our ECU flashing service on our website for these new 2025 Plus models for $349.99. And if you have any questions about getting your new 25 MT-07 tuned or the prior generation CP2s, never hesitate to email us at support@twowheeldynoworks.com. I answer all tech support questions every single day personally, and we are always happy to help get your bike properly tuned and dialed in.